Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are tuning in from. It is time for a little live session. I am super excited because today it's all about, let's talk about wealth, baby. And so I don't know about you, but every time I kind of say that, I'm like, let's talk about wealth, baby. Let's talk about you and me. I just kind of get that song playing in my head. So I thought it'd be a little sassy today. And lean into some opportunities for creating real wealth. I know a lot of what I've been putting out there lately has been talking about this idea around wealth. And when I say wealth, I'm talking about WELLTH. And so when we look at what wealth really is, when we talk about how to create real wealth, when we talk about what that looks like in our life, I want you to think about it in terms of that wholehearted and enlightened space around self-love and leadership. And so when I talk about wealth, I am talking about wholehearted and enlightened in self-love and leadership. And so as we show up and as we're leading more, it is really imperative that we are creating real wealth for ourselves. We cannot lead from empty cups. We cannot show up from empty cups. We cannot keep giving and pouring into others when our own wealth is run dry, when our own cups are feeling a little tapped out. And so right now, with everything that's going on, there just feels like, and I know in talking with a lot of light workers and light warriors and leaders, there's this sense of, I've been pouring into everyone. I have been investing in everyone right now to lift everyone up, to lead through what's happening. And if you're just jumping on, say hi. I would love to know who's here so I can give you a shout out as you are jumping in and tuning into this conversation. And so right now people are really in a place where, especially for those of you that are enlightened leaders working out there, where you have just been giving. You've been giving and giving and giving, and you're investing in other people to make sure that they're doing okay. And you are pouring into them in such a capacity that oftentimes we forget that we haven't poured into ourselves in a while. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some things to pay attention to when it comes to creating your own wealth. And again, it is that space of hello. I love seeing some of you jump on, say hello. Hey, Mary, good to see you here. And so when we talk about wealth, it is that space of creating a wholeheartedness and enlightenment for ourselves, and learning how to tap into our ability for self-love and self-leadership. And so if you are finding yourself, and we're going to talk a little bit about this morning as well, or this afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from, around sort of the this and that space, how you can be in two spaces at once, where you might be pouring into others and feel like you're a little tapped out, or you might be doing this and feeling this on the same side. And I say that if you haven't seen the movie, the Pixar movie from that's called Inside Out, it's a really good example of how you can be feeling multiple things at the same time. You can be feeling happy and sad. You can feel confidence and fear. You can, and so we're at that kind of place right now where a lot of that duality is showing up, and that opportunity for us to think about how we're creating real wealth. Because again, when I talk about wealth from an aspect of WELLTH, it's about knowing how to fill up your own cups of wellness. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the only way we can create the abundance, the prosperity, the wealth, and when I look at wealth, what does that really mean? The WEALTH, it's really around light warriors and leaders being empowered in their own authenticity, light, truth, and heart. When we can stand in that, when we are full or overflowing in that capacity, when we create that wealth, which is the WELLTH, we have the opportunity to open up access for real wealth, which is that freedom and that opportunity to live our truth, to live in our authenticity of who we are, to shine our light, and to receive the blessings and the abundance and the prosperity and the wealth that is really our birthright and really ours to claim. And we need to have both sides of that equation going on. And I see a lot of people talking about abundance strictly from the capacity of wealth in terms of monetary wealth. And we need to be looking at it as a much bigger cup to be filled. And it's wealth, the WELLTH, and wealth, WEALTH, WELLTH, that when we have both aspects of that feeling like they're full, they're complete and overflowing, it's when we create more opportunities for ourselves to really lead, lean in, do more, be more, and allow ourselves really that freedom to just live our lives in the way that we desire. So that being said, let's lean in a little bit today. And if you're jumping on, please say hello. Good morning, everyone. That as you're tuning in, good afternoon, good evening again, wherever you happen to be watching this from. Wanting to talk about what we need to do to fill those cups of wellness. So there are 5 cups that show up when we talk about our own wealth, when we talk about our cups of wellness. And one of those is our spiritual cup. And so when we talk about the spiritual cup, this is really that space around your connection to yourself, your connection to your higher power, your space of knowing who you are and really being dialed into that in a way that says, I trust my own intuition. I feel as if I'm feeding myself spiritually. I'm having that place to allow myself to connect, to breathe, to ground myself into the essence of who I am and the knowingness of how I get to continue to grow and evolve and expand in how I show up and how I serve. And so that spiritual bucket, I often say, is that top point on the star. If you're looking at kind of a 5-point star, it's really the spiritual bucket that we need to be looking at, how we're filling that, how we're connecting into that, and how we're allowing ourselves a space to be grounded and centered in a way that's really meaningful for us. And this looks different for everyone. I think oftentimes we get caught up in the shoulding that happens around what our spiritual walk is supposed to look like. And I think and it's part of what I've learned over the last couple of years in particular, but even over just the last decade or so, around our own journey in opening to grace. And when I say that, it's really grace being this model for a gentleness of mind, body, and spirit. And so what is that way that we lean in and create that wholehearted, that enlightened self-love and leadership for ourselves, that wealth? It's an opportunity to be more gentle in terms of what we need, mind, body, and spirit. And that changes, it shifts, right? And that aspect of spirituality is such a personal domain. I think we get caught up oftentimes in looking at what other people's spiritual walk looks like, or what we're told it should be based on maybe what religion we're connected to, or what our parents say, or even what culturally in society is telling us. And we forget that our spiritual bucket, that spiritual cup of wellness, is a very personal domain. It is a space that is very private. It's very personal, and we get to decide what that looks like. And I think as we talk about opening to grace, as we talk about what that journey is in our own soul quest, it's that realization that we get to choose what that spiritual path looks like for us. And so once we understand that, and once we realize how critical that is for us showing up as light workers or light warriors and leaders, we need to know that that spiritual bucket is really critical in terms of our own wealth and wellness. And so we have the spiritual bucket, and then we have our cup of our mental or our psychological bucket that needs to be filled and needs to be maintained. And we need to make sure that we're feeding that in the right capacity. And then we have our emotional bucket, right? So I look at the top 3 as being the spiritual, the mental, and the emotional cups of wellness that we need to be filling on a regular basis. And they need to be at a point where they're full or overflowing in order for us to be able to show up and serve in the best way possible. And so when we think about how we choose to lead, we think about how we're showing up, we think about how we're serving others. When we keep trying to do that from empty cups, when we do that when we're tapped out, we are not offering the greatest aspects of our light and our gifts. That's really what we're here to serve. And so it's interesting to me because I've said this before, but a lot of people talk about how, it's selfish to make yourself a priority. I really want you to think about the fact that it's actually selfish when you don't. It is incredibly selfish and arrogant when we are not making ourselves as individuals priorities so that we are filling those 5 cups of wellness, and 3 of them I've just discussed. Because when we show up from from cups that are half full or cups that are empty. We are giving people the residual leftover crap versus filling up and giving them the best and highest level of what we have, because we're replenishing, we're restoring, we're renewing, we're resetting, and we're recharging. We have an obligation in what is being called through us and what is being channeled through us. Our purpose, our light. We, as human beings, are our purpose, and we have been put on this earth at this time to show up and deliver the gifts that have been given to us uniquely. When we are not taking opportunity to fill that tank, to fill those cups, to make sure that we are primed in a way that allows our gifts to be activated at the highest and best level, how can we possibly show up and serve people in the best capacity? We need to let go of this idea, this concept that says it's selfish to make you a priority. It's selfish when you don't. And I really can't stress that enough. Until you decide, I have to make my wealth, that area, that space of, and again, for those of you jumping in, wealth being that wholehearted and enlightenment in self-love and leadership. I have to learn how to lead myself. Hey, Jenna, I have to learn how to lead myself first. I have to make sure that I am well spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and then the other two pieces are physically and energetically. And oftentimes when we look at where we're depleted, when we look at what's taxing our bodies, or we look at what's affecting our nervous system or our adrenals, we look at the areas of our physicality and our energy. We say things like, I'm so tired. I need to do something to get some energy back. I need to eat better. I need to work out. And while all of that is possibly true, oftentimes what is showing up physically and energetically for us is actually a symptom. It's a cause and effect outcome of what's not being filled spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. And when I say mentally, I mean psychologically. I mean from our mindset. I mean in our ability for how we're choosing our words and language that we speak to ourselves and we speak to others. It's that personal development. It's that professional development. It's that ability to sharpen the saw and hone our skills. When we are not paying attention to those three cups, spiritual, psychological or mental, and the emotional cups of wealth, oftentimes what we see then is the outcome or result or the consequence that shows up, the lagging effect, if you might, that shows up physically and energetically. A lot of what makes us tired is what we're holding into our bodies in terms of our beliefs, in our conditioning, in our programming. It's what we're not tapping into. We're not giving breath to our emotions. So we suppress that and we contract and we keep that in our body, which makes us tired, which makes us lose our energy. And so we then show up from a place that's feels a bit defeated, that feels a bit tapped out, that feels as if we're exhausted. We end up being resentful and frustrated because we're not taking the pause to say, if I am feeling this way, where is it stemming from? Where am I really tapped out? And where do I have the opportunity to fill those cups back up? And so when we look at those 5 cups of wellness, and that's that space of wholeheartedness and enlightenment in self-love and leadership. When we look at how we get to show up, how we're shining our light, how we serve others, we need to look at, on a regular basis, am I replenishing? Am I feeding myself the soul food I need spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and energetically? And oftentimes those first 3 is the space where we're not paying enough attention. And so when I say that, one of the opportunities that we have to consider is this notion, we oftentimes talk about how there's not enough time and not enough hours in the day, that we never have enough time. And that's because we're really focused on this concept around time management. And so when I say time management, what I mean is Most of the time when we talk about the construct or the context of time management, we're talking about watching the clock. We're talking about how we fill our hours of the day. We get into that cycle of being busy for the sake of being busy. It's saying yes to things that are not necessarily for us. And oftentimes that comes from shame or guilt or all the shoulding we do all over ourselves. And so we lose sight of the ability to really do what I like to call, and I have to say, I borrowed this from one of my mentors. Robin Sharma always talks about focus management. And so really looking at the distinction between focus management versus time management. And so when I say that focus management, or let me start with time management is that space around watching the clock. It's around how you're filling the hours and the minutes of your days. It's around making sure that every void has something that you're filling it with. Versus focus management is around watching your impact. And so I want you to feel the difference in the energy of that. When you talk about time management being, I'm watching the clock and I feel like I'm against the gun and it's just a matter of watching the hours and the seconds and the minutes tick by. Focus management says, I'm really watching my impact. I'm watching how and where and what I choose to show up for and how I choose to serve. It's about prioritizing the things that light me up, where my purpose, is set to due north, and my passion, ignites the path for where I want to be creating momentum. It's the space that when I think about your what, why, and who, and I think about what you want to create, affect, influence, impact, or change in the world, your focus management says, then how I'm showing up and how I'm serving is aligned to those things. Focus management also says I'm creating the opportunity for real wealth, because in order for me to have the highest level impact possible, I need to make sure that I'm taking care and time to fill myself up with the resources, with the soul food, with the soul play that I need so that my attention can be completely aligned and intentional with the things that matter most. We are not here to do everything. And I read a meme recently that just said, look, we are not wired to be working 40 hours a week. We're not wired to be working 24 hours a day, to be sucked into social media, to be on 5 different media channels and these challenges, and to basically be absorbed in our technology sun up from sundown. We need to create space to allow our purpose to shine through. And the only way we do that is by taking pause and taking care of ourselves first. And so we need to create this space that allows us to create a distinction between time management, which is what everybody forces down our throat. And I don't know if you've ever been in the corporate space, and those of you that know my story, 20 years I was in corporate, and what a lot of people don't know, and maybe some of you have heard my story before, some of you may not. I spent 20 years in corporate, but I also had several of my rock bottom moments there. And one of them in particular, I was working for GE at the time. I was in the role of comm ops. And so I was a person that was responsible for handling our deal negotiations with clients and customers. And so it was a really high stress job, and oftentimes just putting out fires and very reactionary. In fact, I joke that when I write my autobiography, it'll be called Sleeping with My Crackberry. And so for those of you that are old enough to remember Crackberry being that really clunky device we had way before iPhones and Androids and things and smartphones in that capacity, I literally was sleeping with my BlackBerry at the time. And so I had a queen size bed and I slept on the left side, and my BlackBerry actually had a pillow in my bed because I was so afraid that I was not going to be able to manage the things I needed to manage and be available for everybody to take care of the deals that needed to go through the system. And what happened was I ended up waking up at one point where I ended up with this debilitating pain in my chest. And debilitating pain to the point where it really was hard to breathe. And every time I tried to take a breath, my chest would hurt. And I remember initially when the pain showed up and it started to become more prominent, and I was at work and I was managing my emails and phone calls and all of these things that were coming at me. I remember looking at my calendar going, I don't have time to go to the hospital right now. I'm going to have to suck it up. I got stuff to do. I didn't even have time for the pain in my chest. Right. And so I was so busy. Like I was busy beyond busy. And, I'd go to the bathroom and have 250 emails in my inbox just from the time I went to use the bathroom. Right. And so anyway, this pain kept getting bigger. And I just kept telling myself, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. I'll figure out what it is. So when I grabbed a few minutes just to take a break, which was a rarity, I was probably eating lunch at my desk with a phone, with an earbud in one ear and a headset on another. And I was probably doing something on email. I went out and looked, as any intelligent person would do. I got out on WebMD, which is the worst site ever, just saying. And anything that you put in there, you stubbed your toe, you broke your fingernail. If you scroll down far enough on that list, I assure you, it will tell you you're dying from cancer, heart attack, or something else. So anyway, I read all these symptoms I'm having and I put them in. And of course, it tells me I'm having a heart attack and I'm dying. And so that does a whole lot for when you've got a pain in your chest. The pain starts getting more, to the point where it literally doubled me over. I was sitting at my desk and I'm like, I can't breathe. Like, I can't even sit upright. I was holding my chest, trying to get work done. And so I finally set up an appointment to go see my doctor. I didn't even go in the emergency room because I was like, well, if I'm dying in a heart attack, I got to get stuff done first. It's crazy what we tell ourselves, the programming we do. And so anyway, I went to the doctor and I'm sitting in the waiting room. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to ask me why he thinks I'm having a heart attack. And like this barrage of questions hit me that literally leveled me in the waiting room at that time, because the first question that popped into my head was, when was the last time you slept? And I remember asking myself that question. And I remember sitting there thinking, when was the last time I slept? And then this little voice in my head said, Candy, not when was the last time you passed out from exhaustion, or not when's the last time you fell asleep drunk because you took the edge off, because I was known for some serious drinking back in the day. Not when you fell asleep at your desk and ended up with like computer key prints on your cheek because you actually fell asleep on your laptop. I'm not talking about that. When's the last time you actually got a good night's sleep? And I started to think about, the past week and the week before. And I just sat there and I'm like, well, it hasn't been in the last 3 weeks. I can't remember the last time I got a good night's sleep. Right. And then the rest, it's like what I call like the floor just dropped at that point. And the questions started coming. And I was like, oh, or is he going to ask me about the fact that, was it the other night I put 5 martinis or 6 down? Holy crap. How many times did I drink this week? Did I put 1 bottle of wine or 2 bottles down? Like I just started, like, it just kept coming like a battery of questions at me. Or is it when I binge ate and then I got mad at myself and I went to the gym and I was working out for 3 hours a night straight and I didn't take a break, and they didn't even let me check in last week because I hadn't even taken a break. And like, I was just like, it was rapid fire in my brain. Is it when I went shopping and I think there's still a bag of something I shopped at Ann Taylor? I don't even know what I shopped, what I bought, but I think I dropped like this much money and blah, blah, blah. And it was just like one thing after another. And, I thought about how my weight would yo-yo up from like size 6 to size 18 in like 6-month period, back and forth. And when I get pissed off at myself because I would have like binged ate, then I would take fat burners and stack them up. It was just crazy what I was doing to myself. And all of it was to take the edge off. And all of it was just to like keep myself upright and moving, which, when you're asking yourself those questions in the waiting room, let me tell you, it doesn't do anything for the pain in your chest. I'm practically on the floor when the doctor finally comes out and decides to see me, which actually led to a battery of tests that was it took some time. And so I had everything from a colonoscopy to an endoscopy to an MRI to CAT scans to you name it. And what ultimately came from all of that was, my doctor called me in when all the tests were done. And he's like, good news. There's nothing substantially wrong with you. You're not dying. You didn't have a heart attack. There's no stroke. I was like, yes. And he's like, sit down. He's like, let's talk about, he's like, we need to have a conversation. And so we had a long conversation. I was 35 at the time. And it was a conversation around what I was doing to myself. It was a conversation around how maxed out I was, how burnt out I was. And, I talk to people all the time about there being 3 levels of burnout. There is burnout that I would say any person that's owned a business, had a job, lived in the US and our culture in the world right now, that knows any level of stress knows some degree of burnout. We have a culture where we've actually used that as a badge of honor. We have talked about how burnt out we are, how busy we are, how stressed we are, and we use it as a metric for success. It's almost like we have this notion of how bad your life sucks. If my life outsucks yours, I win. And so we've created this whole competition around who can outsuck who in the stress and the busy and the crap that we're carrying around with us ourselves, which is crazy when you think about it. And we do this like it's a badge of honor. We wear this with pride that says, look, my life sucks so bad right now. It's so busy. So every person knows some level of burnout, or I would say most people know some level of burnout. So there's that level. Then there's sort of the fumes after the burnout, which is sort of like you're living Groundhog's Day every day. And you're in a space where it's taking everything to just go through the motions of your day. And you're so checked out and you're just kind of like running on fumes, and you just keep tapping out from those depleted wells over and over and over again, trying to scrape whatever crap you can out to hand it off to somebody in a way to lead and to show up and do something. And you're just managing the ability to stay upright for as much as possible. And unfortunately, there's still too many people that know what the fumes are like. And then there's the third phase, which is sort of the black abyss, or that black hole of where you're about to go off the deep end, off the cliff. Like you are hanging on by the thread of all threads. Like it is everything just to get up and get your day going. And I will tell you, back then when I hit rock bottom, when that pain showed up in my chest, I was in the black abyss. I was so tapped out of my life. I was completely numb. I was medicating myself through food, through the gym, through fat burners, through alcohol, through some other decisions I made that weren't so good, just things that were not serving me, and all in the name to take the edge off. I would give everything I had at work, and then I would play just as hard, almost in a rebellious way, to say, then F this. If I got to give all this here, then I'm going to go do this and show up and be a brat that's just like, I want to check out. I don't want to take responsibility. And so I didn't. And what happened was I manifested an actual mass in my chest that tripped a sliding hiatal hernia I didn't even know I had. And what happens is when we are that contracted, when we have completely turned our nervous system inside out and our adrenals are maxed beyond repair, we get to a point where we start to store all that in our body, and it starts to wreak havoc. And so when we keep serving, when we keep trying to give from depleted cups, we ultimately are hurting ourselves in the process. We hurt ourselves psychologically. We hurt ourselves emotionally. We hurt ourselves physically and energetically, and we hurt ourselves spiritually. And so when we think about creating that wealth, we need to have a pool that is constantly being replenished and renewed so that we have something to pull from that's not then creating us harm in our own bodies, in our own psyche, in our own spirit, in our own soul. And so I say that once again to remind us that it is not selfish to make yourself a priority. It is really selfish when you don't. Because if you are not taking care of yourself, it's kind of like why they tell you to put the oxygen mask on first, right? If you're not putting your oxygen mask on first, how can you be of service in any capacity to someone else? And so when I say that, one of the things I want you to realize is that there can be multiple things that are equally true. And it's sort of where the duality of our life plays out, right? You can be resilient and really truly need a break. You can be investing in others and need to be investing in yourself. You can be independent and still need other people. We're wired for connection. We forget we're here to build community and connection. And oftentimes, especially as leaders and light warriors, we isolate ourselves out. We're like, I got this. I'm going to be resilient. I'm going to lead. I don't need anybody. I'm independent. And there's a part of our psyche and spirit that says, I really need somebody. I need connection, right? I need to be able to lean in. I need safe spaces. I need to be held. And there's a difference between needing that from a codependent standpoint and needing that from a connection standpoint. And so it is perfectly, you can have both going on at the same time, where you can be really strong and confident and independent and need someone to hold a space or container for you to be held or for you to be seen, or for you to be cared for, you can need both and have both. And so you also can be kind and you can have boundaries. In fact, it actually is a greater level of kindness when you do have boundaries and you're very clear about explaining and setting those expectations for others. You can be kind and you can have boundaries. And many times we need to have the boundaries in order to have more compassion and to be kinder. So I want you to think about that. You can be doing your best and you can now know more that has you wanting to do better. And I love the saying from Maya Angelou that always says, do your best until you know better and then do better. You can do your best and then have knowledge and know more where then you want to do better. And that's the beautiful juxtaposition of life, the duality that says we can be this and this. You can be happy and sad. And again, if you haven't seen the movie Inside Out, it's a great example of how you can have multiple things going on at once. You can be sure and you can be confident and you can have things change. There are things that 5 years ago I stood in my truth and said, this is what is my truth. This is how I view leadership. And that was me playing at my best. And that was me playing with what I know. And that still was a level. And I still believe that. And I may have a different way that I put that in context now. I may have a different way I share that. I may have another level of what that looks like, or I may have changed my belief because I now have access to something I didn't have then, which changes the way I view leadership or change the way we lean in or change the way I talk about wealth. And so I want you to realize that you can have both. We also can realize that others may have it worse, and it doesn't take away from your pain, your suffering, your reality, and your trauma. We need to stop getting into this space where it's, well, they had it worse than I do. It doesn't diminish the reality and the truth of what you're experiencing. It's not about comparing yourself to others. It's about leaning in and saying, what do I need to heal, which is a big aspect of wealth, right? It's that ability to heal the traumas and the triggers that are existing in any one of those cups, physically or spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, or energetically. We have wounds that need to be healed. We have triggers that get to be addressed. We have things we get to be more curious about and grow and evolve and expand from. So that when we understand, when we take a responsibility, if we truly take the responsibility for leadership, again, leadership being the function of three things, right? How we choose to show up, how we choose to serve, and how we choose to take personal responsibility inside those two spaces. If we truly take that responsibility of leadership seriously and recognize, if you feel the call that you are a light warrior, if you feel the call that says, I know I have something to stand in, I know that I am my purpose, I know that I'm here to give and serve in some capacity, then we also need to take the responsibility to make sure our cups of wellness are full or overflowing. We need to create real wealth so that we can show up at the highest and best capacity possible, and so that we can invest in others and be investing in ourselves. And so when I say that, I want you to think about the 5 elements. And there's a parallel to the 5 cups of wealth that I talk about: that spiritual cup, the mental cup, the emotional cup, the physical, and the energetic, that are also aligned with the 5 elements of life. And so I want you to think about this. And I saw this posted once, and this really resonated for me. And so when we remember who we truly are, first of all, remember that you are water. Water being that space and that ability to cry, to cleanse, to be in flow, and to let it go. So the water aspect of who we are is that feminine space, that gentleness. And remember when I talked about when we are opening to grace, the G in grace is the gentleness of mind, body, and spirit. It is the ability to remember that we are water. We have an ability to cleanse, to be in flow, to be gentle and kind with ourselves, our emotion, and what's passing through us at any given point. We also need to remember that we are fire, fire being a more masculine energy, fire being that ability to burn, that ability to tame or control, that ability to adapt or pivot, and that ability to ignite. And so to be able to take action, to be able to create movement, this is more of that masculine energy that runs in us. We also are aspects of fire, right? So we all have aspects of water. We all have aspects of fire. And when we allow ourselves to be in that space, we also remember that we have aspects of air. Air being that ability to observe, that ability to watch, to witness, that ability to take breath or to breathe, that ability to focus, and that ability to decide. And you'll actually see in air, there's actually both feminine and masculine energy inside of it. The ability to witness, the ability to watch, the ability to observe and breathe is more of the feminine energy. The ability to focus and decide is much more of that masculine energy. And so we have this dance that's constantly going on, and our opportunity and part of the wealth we create for ourselves is knowing how to dance between these 5 elements. The 4th element is remembering that we are earth, and earth being that ability to ground ourselves, to center, that ability to give, that ability to build, and that ability to heal. And so there is more feminine energy in this, and you also feel some of that masculine, that ability to build, that ability to take action, that ability to create. And we have that ability to allow ourselves that healing, that grounding, that ability to center back to who we are. And then spirit, we need to remember that we are spirit. And this is our ability to connect. This is our ability to build relationships. This is our ability to listen. This is our ability to really listen and be still and to know who we are at our deepest level. And so when we have the opportunity to slow down, to be gentle, and again, opening to grace. And one of the things that I'm going to be teaching is really this model that has shown up for me over the last couple of years in my own journey and opening to grace. And grace being the gentleness of mind, body, and spirit. The G being the gentleness, the R being the reverence for all of life and knowing the connectedness, knowing that we are one with everything and everyone in nature. The A being the allowing of our own authentic light to shine, that ability to step in and voice and express our truth. The C being really around our connection to self, our connection to others, and our connection to our higher calling and spirit, or source, Tao, Penelope, Buddha, whatever you want to call it, God, universe. And then the E being the embodiment of all of that, that says I get to expand and express my soul, what's truly calling through us and wanting to be expressed out. When we allow that to happen, we've got to take the care and time first to invest in our own wealth. We cannot create the opportunity and the journey for our own soul quest and our own pathway of opening to grace until we allow ourselves to really evaluate how we're creating real wealth. And again, wealth being that WELLTH, that space where we feel wholehearted. We feel like we are in a space of deep enlightenment for our own ability for self-love and self-leadership, so that we can create what I like to call the greatest aspect of abundance, wealth, being the WEALTH, which is warriors who are living in their authenticity. They are living in their light. They are living in their gifts, and they're living in their truth. And when we are allowing ourselves to do that, we get to serve at a higher capacity. We get to be the light that's needed right now. And so for those of you that are like, I need to look at how to invest in myself, I need to take some space and grace to slow down for a minute, to be gentle, to lean in. I have created a virtual retreat. It is a gentle space. It's going to be 3 hours on Friday afternoon. So for them, some of you are like, I can't take Friday off. Then don't join. Let yourself do what you've got to do Friday morning, and then give yourself 3 hours on Friday afternoon to invest in yourself. We will be doing about 6 hours on Saturday with some breaks, and then there will be another 3 hours on Sunday. And so this is a virtual retreat I've created for the second weekend in November, so November 12th through 14th. And it's an opportunity for leaders, male, female, it doesn't matter who you are, leaders, enlightened leaders, and light warriors who know right now they've been giving in full capacity. You have been showing up and serving everyone. You have been lifting others, investing in others. You have been just pouring into people. And you recognize that you haven't taken the care and time to pour back into yourselves. And so this is a restorative weekend. This is a weekend to do some really deep, gentle work to help you reset those 5 cups of wellness, to help you get clear on what soul food you need to be filling those 5 cups of wellness. And those 5 cups of wellness being your spiritual cup, your mental cup, your emotional cup, your physical and energetic. We're going to do some real interactive work. You're going to get some opportunity to do some individual work. You're going to get some prompts that are going to allow you to do some automated flow around some different things. Part of why I broke the weekend down the way that I did is so that you can plug back into your family and those things, and you can give yourself space for real integration, because there will be some assignments, so to speak, or some invitations for things you can be doing in between our time together. And so I'm feeling deeply called that right now there needs to be a space, a safe space for leaders to, I guess, for lack of a better word, let their hair down, for a safe space where leaders and light warriors can lean in a community of other people who are giving so much, who are showing up so intentionally, so profoundly, are trying to lead in every capacity, and really need a space where you can be seen without the expectation of needing to be the rock for everyone, or the source for everyone, or the inspiration, or the leader, but giving you a safe space where you get to just be and do some of your own work for you, so that you can refill, you can renew, you can replenish. I love my rewords. You can reset and you can recharge, so that you can be in a place to be fully restored going into the last 2 months of this year. Think about it. We're heading into November, y'all. And it is, for a lot of you, it's year-end close, or it's the holidays, and all of the stress that's been building up over this past year and past 2 years. Truly, there's an intensity that amplifies as we get into these last 2 months, and wanting to give you that space before we go into the heaviness of it and the density of it, so that you can have your armor, so to speak, and armor being kind of a light word, your force field, let's call it that, your Care Bear stare activated fully, that you can feel restored and renewed, so that what's being asked of you, so what's being called through you, you are in a position to show up and shine at your highest and best capacity. So I am just creating an invitation for you to join me in this space. It is going to be a beautiful, activating, gentle virtual retreat that is going to give you a safe space where you can lean into your own vulnerability. You can lean into your own whatever is showing up for you, and go through some things that are going to help you restore and replenish your own cups. So I will post the details in the comments. It is the Wealth Warriors Weekend. And so I invite you to join me and the other leaders that are going to be part of that activating and integration weekend. And so this is your opportunity. It's your opportunity to invest in yourself. It's your opportunity to really look at how to prioritize creating real wealth for yourself. And again, remembering that it is not selfish to put yourself as a priority. It's actually selfish when you don't. And you have a deep desire. I know that you wouldn't be part of this community if you weren't, but you have a deep desire to serve at your highest level. You are being called to shine that light even brighter. And we often need the tools. I know there's been a lot of things that have shown up for me. I've had some dark spaces over the last 2 years that it's been tough. And it's tough thinking you've got to do this alone. This is an opportunity to engage in a community and allow yourself to be seen with other people who are doing work that is very similar. So with that, y'all, I hope that there were some great nuggets you could walk away from. I look forward to seeing you as part of the Wealth Warriors weekend. I will be going live the next couple weeks with some just juicy nuggets, ways that you can create some space for yourself, and just know that I see you, I honor you, and I admire you for the way that you're showing up fully and the way that you're investing in others. I invite you to take an opportunity to invest in yourself as well. So with that, everybody, I will catch up with you soon. Have a phenomenal rest of your day, and love you all.